It's delivery day here at the office, and Moza sent over a ton of sim racing gear. Now, I'll be completely honest, I have made an intentional effort over the years to avoid car content on this channel. Mostly. We have a few exceptions, and you guys probably are aware of those. We have, I think, a cars playlist on this channel. But I can't just keep publishing car stuff because, well, that's not fair to you guys. You didn't sign up for that necessarily. And even if I did 1 or 2 car videos a year, we always get folks in the comments who freak out because, oh, it's one video. Hold on, you're changing course, Greg. We didn't sign up for cars. We signed up for computers. So if you're going to switch to a car channel, I'm unsubscribing. And that's it. They give you one chance and that's it. They're gone. Viewers can be pretty fickle, but that's the industry I'm in. I have to roll with the hand that I'm dealt, and well, I think a lot of YouTubers can relate to that. The moment you just barely try to venture outside that very specific lane that your viewers have for you, you get penalized for it. But I think that racing sim stuff is a very safe and a convenient blend of my 2 true passions, that being technology and cars. Of course, this makes me feel like I'm driving a real car because the technology packed into a lot of this stuff is just, it's so incredible. The feedback that you get, especially from the R12 base that I'm gonna show you in this video, is phenomenal. But you also need tech to run this. Tech, of course, we're talking about a computer, you need a beefy monitor, maybe some sort of like racing sim frame, so to speak, if you want a true kind of like laid back experience, if you want to do something Fomula related. I've been using Thrustmaster products for a good while, and I think it's time for an upgrade. You've served me well over the years, but it's time we part ways. I hope you'll stay with me.
If you're planning your next PC build, then consider checking out our sponsor, VIP SCD Key. Their Windows 10 and 11 OEM keys sell for a fraction of retail and will unlock the full potential of your OS. They'll also remove those pesky activation watermarks. Click the links below to get started today, and be sure to use our special offer code SKGS for a sweet discount on a variety of options, including Windows 10 and 11, Pro and Home, and more.
I want to kick things off by quickly discussing the Moza brand, and you're going to hear me pronounce this more like an Italian, Moza Racing, right? But the Americans will say Moza Racing. I think the Italian way sounds a bit better. Anyway, this company is held in very high regard in the sim racing community. They compete with the likes of Fanatec, and they're definitely a step or 2 above the more entry-level sim gear from the likes of Logitech or, say, Thrustmaster. That's not to say that those companies don't produce high-end gear. It's just when you think of those brands with regard to sim racing, you tend to think of, like, say, the T300, right? The servo base that we've been using for several years. It's a great entry-level kit, especially for the money spent, but if you want something a bit more professional, this, in my opinion, is the way to go. And I can tell you, this thing did not disappoint. This is an extremely heavy setup. The base is like solid aluminum. There's carbon accents on it. It comes with 2 pedals. You get the throttle and the brake, of course, but you can buy the optional clutch pedal. And I've got to say, this thing has pretty awesome feedback. There's like very clearly a bite point in this, just like in a normal manual transmission car. Now, if you can't drive manual, this would actually be a really cool way to teach somebody how to. If you wanted to learn yourself even, you could set up the 3rd pedal on the base like we have here. It doesn't take very long at all to connect everything. Actually, they have a built-in little like hub underneath the base that keeps things nice and clean, just a few screws to tighten it all down. And of course, you can change the angle and pitch of these pedals as well, if maybe they're too high or too low. Moza's baked in all of that customization, which I love. But if you set all of this up and also configure the game in question correctly, you could be driving a virtual stick shift car, no problem. And the feedback is going to be, again, fairly accurate. I own a manual transmission car. I actually bought my dad's 1991 Corvette, very low miles, 11,000 miles for a C4, which is a very underappreciated generation of Corvette, might I add. The transmission in there is nothing to write home about. It is a 6-speed ZF, but you know, the shifter itself kind of feels a little slushy. It is what it is. It's a car from the 90s. This actually has a literal bite point that you can feel with your foot, which is, again, much more true to life and should make you a much better driver of a manual transmission car. You don't have to, you know, trash your friend's Camaro's transmission to learn how to drive stick anymore. Now, this thing is awesome. This is the R12 direct drive wheelbase. This is what's going to give you that feedback through your wheel. You can see that you can adapt multiple wheels to the front of this, and the locking mechanism is super straightforward. It's actually totally toolless, and that's something that I really love about this Moza setup that you'll see compared to my older Thrustmaster setup, which was very finicky. The wheel would often come very loose. It just felt like a much cheaper setup. Now, the R12 is called the 12 because it's capable of up to 12 Newton meters of peak torque, which doesn't sound like a lot on paper, but it is capable of doing some damage. Just Ask me how I know that. I did tweak my wrist a bit, just I went way overkill with the force feedback settings. That's something that you should definitely start on the lower end and then slowly work your way up, both in the Pithouse software, which is Moza's in-house software for calibrating all this stuff, and in-game as well. Because games like Formula 1, F123, they are going to have their own force feedback settings that you're going to want to tweak with to get that right feeling. She's not cheap, of course, but most direct drive systems won't be. This is going to have a large motor that's attached directly to the shaft that connects the wheel to your hand, so you're going to get very precise feedback here. There's no belt system involved like there is in the T300 that I came from. That's going to muddy the waters a bit. It's going to kind of dilute, it's going to lower the resolution of that feedback. All the tiny little bumps can get lost in translation from a rubber belt that's attached to another gear, that's attached to another gear that's attached to the shaft that's connected to your steering wheel. You get the idea. A motor that's literally turning your hands, turning the wheel that your hands are holding. That's going to give you a much more accurate feeling. And if it's any indication of just how powerful the R12 actually is, check out how beefy this AC adapter is. An over 200 watt adapter just for a base. Because this motor consumes so much power, it needs to be able to switch between left and right very quickly. It needs to be able to do so very powerfully as well in certain instances, especially if you're taking really sharp turns, or say you get nudged by a car that's on your left or right, or worst case, say you just slam into a wall at 100 plus kph. I mean, no one wants to do that. I don't recommend you hold the wheel when something like that happens, but it does happen, and if you want that to feel real, the R12 is certainly capable of it. I will note though that it's not the most powerful base they offer. The R21 is capable of up to 21 newton meters of peak torque, which is way more than I need, and frankly, that's a bit scary. Now, the last piece of this puzzle is the FSR Formula wheel, and Moza's done a really great job with this one. It not only makes the Formula 1 racing experience feel so much more real, but the buttons, the tactile feedback baked into each of these, the fact that you have functional dials pretty much everywhere, brake bias, you've got your differential on the right, you've got 4 paddles, again, 2 for up and down shifts, you get the other 2 you can use for your clutch. This is just the full package, in my opinion. So you've got perforated leather handles, you've got an entire front fascia that's pretty much carbon fiber, you've got these carbon paddle shifters, you've got, of course, the quick disconnect system, which is gonna make a world of difference if you wanna swap between wheels very quickly, and the screen baked into this. Now, the screen is probably the coolest thing about this wheel, because you can buy wheels that have all the bells and whistles minus the screen, and it's not gonna feel as genuine in a Formula 1 experience. Now, a lot of cars outside of Formula 1 also have screens in their wheels, so if you want to use this for, say, GT3 style racing, you could do that as well. It doesn't have to be strictly for Formula 1 racing, but because that's a majority of what I do, that and a set of course of competition, I like using this. And you can actually calibrate the screen to show a bunch of different things in their Pithouse software. This linked up with F123, the telemetry, feedback, everything, automatically. Like, it didn't require any setup at all. Not only allowing a wheel like this to be just fully customizable, even down to the very colors of buttons. These buttons do also light up, which is really cool. You can change the colors of those. They're very tactile. You get these like analog style arrow things, kind of like what you find on like a PlayStation or an Xbox, but they're not actually analog. Like, they only really function as like up, down, left, right, and then push in buttons, but it's still nice to have these. It's actually great for navigating through you know, an on-screen menu or something. Not sure if the camera's gonna pick this up well, but you can see this thin black streak here has baked in LEDs as well. These are gonna be your shift indicator lights, and you can actually change these to whatever color combo you want. Individual LEDs can be configured, which is super cool. Now, to quickly compare this wheel to something Thrustmaster offers in around the same price range, this is the SF1000, a Ferrari-derived wheel. It does have some carbon fiber accents. The body is mostly plastic, although these shifters are aluminum, which is a nice touch. This overall feels slightly cheaper than the Moza equivalent, which is okay, and the Moza wheel is a bit more expensive. Just wanted to kind of show you next to each other here what these two look like and how they mount to their respective bases as well. Moza spent a ton of time making this quick release system very durable, but also very fast, very effective. There's a huge collar system that essentially locks this wheel into place, and it takes quite a bit of force to remove it. In the SF1000's case, the mount is actually made out of like some kind of composite material. I'm not sure if it's purely plastic, but it is definitely not metal. It's nowhere near as solid as metal, and as a result, the tightening of this wheel tends to suffer a bit. The Moza wheel has stayed firmly in place the entire time thanks to its durable locking mechanism. It's something I can't fully describe with words, but you'll definitely notice the difference in feeling handling both of these wheels, especially when they're mounted to their respective
respective bases. The Moza wheel just feels so much more firm. You feel a lot more confident racing with it. In fact, I think the weak point now is my sim racing frame. That tends to shake a bit more than the wheel did in the SF1000. So just something else to note. I think I've exposed another weak point by upgrading other aspects of the racing sim itself. But here is where, in my opinion, Moza really separates itself from brands like Thrustmaster and Logitech, and I would argue even to an extent, brands like Fanatec. This is their pit house software, and you can see I've got all of my devices already detected. It was instant. Once I downloaded the software, it automatically picked up everything I had connected, including the base, the pedals, and this wheel here. And you can see I'm rotating the wheel left and right. I've got it locked where my maximum steering angle is only 180 degrees in each direction, which is what you want for Formula 1. And that's literally just a one-click toggle. If I want to click on 540 instead for more of a GT style, you can see I can rotate my wheel suddenly more than I could have before, and the base is strong enough to prevent me from tugging on that wheel anymore. So it really does feel like you've fully locked out your wheel in whatever config you have. You can see that I can push on these pedals here off to the right. I've got my throttle push. I can push on the brake. I can push on the clutch. About here is where the bite point is, about 2/3 the way through pedal travel. But that can, of course, all be calibrated very easily. Same with game force feedback for the R12 base. But there's even more customization through each of these additional tabs below the home tab. We've got basic settings, advanced settings here for the base. You can see there are so many things to tinker with. You can set individual curves for different products. You can set a base curve. You can set all kinds of stuff in here. Soft, limit, stiffness. I don't even know what half of this stuff does. I haven't even tweaked with it. Honestly, it feels pretty good just out of the box. Just tweaked a few things in F123 side, but this is all for the most part just super easy, self-explanatory. Of course, I'm not going to turn this into a tutorial at all, but just wanted to let you know that this software is pretty fantastic. And check out how easy it is just to change the colors of buttons. You just hover over one of these buttons here, and then I can click, so let's say orange, and now it is orange live. That is it's just so easy, so intuitive. Whoever designed this software, kudos. This is usually the downside of any brand, but you guys have actually nailed the software here. I haven't found a single hiccup yet, apart from maybe a bit of lag in the screen and the RPM LEDs. I think that might just be a communication issue with F123, because otherwise everything here is pretty much instantaneous. So yeah, I have been very much enjoying this gear, and I'm sure I will be for several years, much like I have with the Thrustmaster stuff. And again, at the time that I got the Thrustmaster sim, I had not really done too much in the way of sim racing, so I didn't really know what I was missing by foregoing more expensive equipment like this. And for all intents and purposes, that was a very fine introductory setup. I would have no problem just sticking with that had I not jumped head first into the Moza ecosystem. I mean, this is just objectively better gear. It's better built, it feels better in the hand, it feels better when driving, the feedback is much more precise. It's something that I can't adequately describe over camera. Of course, you're gonna have to maybe experiment with these in person if possible, but if you just wanna take my word for it, this is definitely a step up. Is it worth the price difference? That depends. If you're just kind of like a casual racer and you just need something, I probably wouldn't spend this much money on Moza gear. I definitely wouldn't spend as much as what Fanatec offers for some of their stuff either. So it's not like I'm, targeting a specific brand here with this statement. I just, in general, wouldn't spend more than, say, I don't know, $800 to $1,000 all in for a racing sim if I don't really care much about it. I obviously do have a passion for racing, a passion for cars, and a passion for tech, so this stuff just, I get all giddy like Christmas morning when I see stuff like this in the office. I should add that you can also save some money by buying bundles, so if you want like an R5 base with like a generic like circular wheel, they have options like that, and you typically save $100 or $200 if you buy the bundle. Typically you're gonna be, if you're just jumping into this for the first time, you're gonna be buying a wheel and a base anyway, so maybe consider those bundles. You're looking at about $1,600 to $1,800 USD, somewhere in that ballpark once taxes and shipping's all worked out, for the setup that you saw. And that's not including the frame, mind you, which is from a different brand. Again, that's Next Level Racing. That doesn't include a monitor that you're gonna probably want that's dedicated to the racing sim. You're not gonna wanna move a screen over and mount it every single time. I recommend just getting a large monitor, even if it's a cheaper one. It's just better to have a fixed monitor in place that you never have to worry about again. And of course, you're gonna need a PC to drive all of this gear, and that's assuming you don't already have an extra one laying around. You're gonna want it to be capable of some higher refresh rates, obviously, because
that gives you that much more fluid experience. It feels a little more real. Typically with racing games, that matters quite a bit. So, I mean, you could sink, again, thousands upon thousands of dollars into a racing sim. You could sink thousands upon thousands into just the eSIM gear, like the wheel and the pedals and the base. I don't think that's absolutely necessary. This is gonna give you 8 to 9/10 of the realism. I mean, just the vibration, the feedback through the wheel is enough to keep me satisfied for several years. It already has, and now it just feels that much more real with the R12 and the FSR. I'd also like to add that I am by no means an eSIM guru. There are plenty of channels out there that know much more about these kinds of products than I do. I'm just an enthusiast. I just love equipment like this. I wanted to give you my raw impressions of an upgrade from, say, some cheaper entry-level Thrustmaster gear up to the big leagues, up to some Moza racing gear. And I've got to say, as much as I do enjoy the experience of racing with this equipment, this is a lot of money. And it's important that you make informed purchase decisions ahead of time. You don't want to deal with, boxing this stuff back up, sending it back, dealing with the return process. It's just a hassle. So if you can get your hands on gear like this, maybe in a brick and mortar, that would be fantastic. That way you know exactly what you're buying before you pull the trigger. Would I personally spend this much money on this gear? No, I would not. There's a reason why I haven't to date. I'm definitely gonna be using this gear now, but I would never have purchased this much equipment out of pocket. Not at these prices, there's no way. This is almost $2,000 worth of stuff. I am not taking my sim racing as seriously as others do, and there's a reason for that. I just don't have the time. Some folks make entire careers out of sim racing, which is good for them. I would love to be in their shoes, but I have many other matters to attend to on a daily basis, and so I just don't get around to sim racing as much as I wish I could, and as a result, I don't think that spending almost $2,000 on gear is really all that justified. And then on top of that, dedicated monitor setup, a racing frame, a seat, it can really add up. I would have been just fine with the Thrustmaster stuff. If this is a 10 in terms of feedback, and this isn't perfect hardware, of course, but let's just say for the sake of discussion, if this is all a 10 out of 10, the Thrustmaster stuff is probably a 6 out of 10. But you know what? A 6 out of 10 is still pretty good for the money spent. And I think that all in was around $1,000, so almost half of what all this Moza gear costs. Just something else to consider. I'm gonna have the Thrustmaster gear, as well as, of course, all this Moza gear linked in the video description. If you wanna jump into racing sim stuff for the first time, I think that this might be a bit overkill, but Moza definitely makes some pretty interesting, cheaper options as well that you can check out on their site, which will be linked in the description on top of everything else that you've seen in this video. That's all for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, stick around for the next one. My name's Greg. Thanks for learning with me.